in my first job out of college. After a year or so, I got promoted to be a manager. So pretty quickly, I went from being at a peer level to being at the boss level, right? One specific employee at this organization was my peer partner for quite a while. And then all of a sudden, bam, overnight, I was now her boss. I didn't know how to handle this, right? Nobody taught me how to go from peer to boss successfully. And so I just messed the situation up. At first, I was just too easy on her, too soft on her, letting her get away with things that, I wouldn't let other people get away with. And then I realized that wasn't working. Other people were seeing that was causing morale issues, engagement issues. And so I overcompensated. I flip-flopped. I started being too hard on her and getting on her case about things that weren't necessary and that I wasn't getting on other people's case about. Ultimately, this employee became disengaged. And I believe that I'm partially, if not mostly, responsible for her lack of engagement. Ultimately, the position didn't work out for her. Going from peer to boss is hard, especially if nobody shows you how. This sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I'm pissed off at you.
Me specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck.
Hey, all you lovely people out there. Welcome to another episode of the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast with Mike and Ethan Nash.
Hey, Ethan.
Hey, Mike. Slash Dad.
Lovely people out there.
They're all lovely people. Everybody's lovely in their own way.
Everyone is special.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're excited to be back. We've got quite a treat for you this episode. Actually, this episode is based on a lot of questions that we're getting in from our listeners. And Mike, you want to kind of explain the general gist of the questions?
The general gist of it would be that
gist
is the word. But hey, you know what? We get this question. Not only do I get this question all the time, I would say probably once every month or so out in the consulting world, I get this question. But we get this question from listeners as well, which is talk about the challenges or how do you go from being a peer to being a manager of those exact same people. As you just explained, Ethan, in your story, it is really, really hard. And I've watched a lot of people misstep and kind of suffer for it. So we're here to talk about that today.
Yeah. And I definitely misstepped in that scenario that I explained at the beginning of this episode.
You sure did.
I think I was walking the line between feeling like I didn't want to come off like the promotion got to my head. And so I was treading lightly, and then overcompensating. Of course, I wanted to essentially, show that I had authority now. And it was just it was a tough line to walk. So, I guess what are the first things you should do when going from a peer to the boss? I mean, the power relationship immediately changes just overnight.
Yeah, well, you mentioned power there, and I want to comment on your story. You remember the power differential discussion we had a couple months ago, right? Listeners may recall that when we talk about the power differential, we want to find this happy medium place that we call mitigation, right? We want to mitigate the power differential. What we don't want to do is try to eliminate it. And what we don't want to do is try to exaggerate it. And your story, I think, really illustrates that pendulum really well, right? Some of your behaviors, I think as a manager, you were leaning toward eliminating it, which is usually around, wanting to be liked and wanting to be respected by not coming down hard on people and, being kind, and which is all fantastic things, but we go too far. And then we swing to the other side, which is, okay, now I have to show that I'm the boss.
Right.
And we exaggerate the power differential. And I think your story is a beautiful example of how easy it is to err on either side and how hard it is to find the middle ground. And today, if we can help listeners maybe start out in the middle and maybe not have to do as much penduluming, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So let's try to tackle that today.
All right, let's maybe do that today.
But really, okay, so you go from peer to being a boss. Oftentimes, there's not necessarily any guidance on how to do that correctly.
Right.
I mean, what would be the first thing that you would start with to make sure that transition goes smoothly for you and for your new employees that were once your peer?
Well, I'm gonna kind of get into that a little slowly by saying, before we talk about maybe the behaviors that you're going to want to engage in right away, let's talk about mindset, right? What should you be thinking about as you make this transition? And I just want to remind everybody that the relationship is going to change. And I think it's fair, and I think it's helpful for you as a manager or as a person who's going to become a manager to just acknowledge that this relationship you have with other people is going to change. That is part of the deal. And I think we need to be prepared for that. I think it surprises people, or I think it scares people. When you accept that role, understand that you're going to have a different relationship with these people. And that's not to say that you can't be, you have to give up your friendships. We'll talk about that today for sure. I have some very specific beliefs around friendship with your employees. You don't have to drop those friendships. However, if you're not prepared for the fact that those friendships will change, you're going to be caught off guard.
Okay.
So that's one mindset. The other mindset piece is just, again, I don't want to be redundant, but understand that you do now inherit a power differential that was not there before. That is why the relationships are going to change. And it's really easy to get a little freaked out about the power differential that you're now inheriting, right? And you're going to have to ask yourself, what do I do with this? Right. How do I, and really a lot of what we'll be talking about today will fit right into this. How do I not eliminate it in a way that's really unhealthy, and how do I not exaggerate it? So that's kind of, again, sort of a mindset. Think about those things ahead of time. And by the way, if you're out there as a director, as a manager who's about to promote somebody else who, from peer to boss, please talk about this with them. Don't just say, welcome to management, good luck, and walk away. There's a whole lot of stuff you should be doing to help prepare that person, including, of course, just basic management skills and training. But also, you're going to change your role. You're going to have a different relationship now with these people. Let's talk about that. Let's manage it a little bit.
Right. So if you're a director or a boss that is about to promote someone that is now going to be the manager over their former peers, I mean, I would say really the first thing, like you said, sit them down and have a conversation about that mindset piece and make sure that they understand that things are going to change.
Absolutely.
And kind of check, where their headspace is at with that. And if they're prepared and hopefully able to provide some tools for that transition to go successfully.
Yeah, at least one discussion. I think this should be a process. That onboarding process should be thoughtful. You kind of have to engineer this change and help this manager make that change. So absolutely. Most organizations, we find when they promote leaders, managers, and when they bring in managers even from the outside, they really tend to do a pretty poor job of onboarding and preparing. And instead, they engage in what we've talked about here, of course, as the Peter Principle, right? Which is, the Peter Principle itself, of course, is we get promoted till we reach our level of incompetence, which is welcome to management, good luck, sink or swim. And then, unfortunately, that person sometimes doesn't make it.
Right.
Or they do damage.
Now, we're gonna take a quick detour here. Now, you did mention, hiring someone from the outside to be a manager as opposed to hiring someone inside the organization. So I mean, what do you think that are the upsides of being the boss of your peers, right? So getting promoted to then manage your former peers. What do you think the upside of that is compared to hiring someone from the outside? And is there a preference there as far as organizational health goes?
Great question. I promoting from within versus bringing in from the outside. I'm not going to go on record as saying one is better. I think that there's value.
I will.
Okay, well, you'll be wrong. No, there's value in both. And let's start with the promoting from within. It can be pretty frustrating to work in a culture where hiring comes in from the outside. Leadership always comes in from the outside. That can be frustrating for the people who now feel like there's no upward mobility.
Right.
It can be really demoralizing. It can hurt morale. So finding people within the organization who are good, potentially really good managers or leaders, I think there's a ton of value in that for morale.
Right. Just knowing that there's upward mobility.
Absolutely. Right. And you also have people being promoted who have institutional knowledge, who understand what you're doing, who understand the culture. Hopefully you're promoting people who have already been good role models. And so that's a strengthening of the culture of the organization as well. There's a lot of upside to internal promotions as long, and this is the point, as long as you're not just casually moving someone in and not preparing them. That to me is the crux right there. Now, of course, the benefit of bringing in people from the outside is new ideas and new perspectives and
no dirty laundry.
No dirty laundry, and a different kind of credibility because they don't have to deal with the past or those relationships that were already in place. So to me, it's a wash. I think it's a 50-50. I think a company that does both is probably on the right track.
Right. I've never seen a company, you may have, I've never seen a company that only solely promotes from the outside or hires someone from the outside. However, I have seen organizations that only, as a rule, promote from the inside, so everybody starts on the same track. Do you think there's any issue with that?
I do. I don't like locking yourself into a rule on this. I think that you are potentially limiting your company from really good outside influences and sources and creativity.
Limit of diversity of thought as well, right? If everybody is homegrown from inside.
Yep.
So
Now, I will say I do have one company I worked with in the last 4 or 5 years. They had a leadership team, we'll say, of about 20 people, directors. Mm-hmm. The last time they had promoted from within was more than a decade ago.
Wow.
Yeah, they were always bringing people from the outside, and it really did cause a morale problem. It became really obvious in that organization that people did not feel valued or honored. They didn't feel like why are we all being skipped over? We must all suck, kind of thing. So it was more than just there's no upward mobility. It was, we don't even feel valued.
Right. That makes sense. Rough. A couple more things on this subject as far as maybe the upside, because there's probably a lot of people out there. There obviously is a lot of people out there that are going from, peer to boss. And I think it is beneficial to think about, there's a lot of advantages for you right now, right? The politics of the organization, better than an outsider, right? Your former peers' strengths and weaknesses from working in the trenches with them. That's a huge benefit. And also the team may be able in some situations to give you more candid feedback, and vice versa, because there may be some more trust there. So those are some benefits. But
on the other hand, if you are promoted, let me reverse that. You're promoting somebody and they were sort of universally disliked by their peers.
Right.
You're setting up a really difficult situation for everybody at that point.
And that's just a bad promotion.
Yeah.
that's a subject for a different day.
Yep.
Well, let's bring it back. So you talked about the first thing to do is just get in the right mindset. All right. Now, what about what should you do with your new employees? Like, what are some of the first steps you should take? Day one, week one, overnight. You are now their boss. They know it. What should you do?
Great question. What we will be getting to in this episode, of course, is what not to do as well. So let's make sure we bookmark that, because there are several landmines we want to make sure we avoid. But yeah, the number one thing, guys, is let's have conversations. I mean, this is one of those changes in the system that needs to be addressed directly, as opposed to ignored, business as usual. I always recommend that if somebody's now coming in as a new manager of people that he or she was working alongside before, it's time to have a conversation. And there's lots of really cool ingredients, I think, of those conversations. And this conversation probably most likely should include a group conversation as well as some individual one-on-one conversations. But I would say, for example, hey guys, this is a little bit awkward. Right. Let's just lean into it.
Right.
This is a little bit awkward. It's awkward for me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Call it the elephant in the room.
Exactly. It's probably awkward for some of you. I'm acknowledging that there's some uncomfortability in this switch. So let's talk about it. Right. Mm-hmm. I think another part of that conversation needs to be, there really is going to be some changes just because I'm a new manager. And I don't know exactly what those all are. I'm going to be spending some time asking you guys your thoughts and your opinions. I'm not promising everything's going to be status quo. I've got some thoughts and some ideas. I do want to bounce those off you guys, though. Mm-hmm. I want to hear your ideas. I think showing up as somebody who is willing to hear input is one of the most important things you can do right up front. Right. Because people are going to have fear, right? Mm-hmm. No matter who their new boss is, even if it wasn't a peer, mm-hmm. There's fear. What does this change mean? What's going to happen? What are his or her new ideas? So let's deal with that by making it obvious that I'm going to be the kind of leader that asks questions, seeks input. And so right up front, let them know that I'm going to be asking some questions. I'm going to be meeting with you guys one-on-one. I want to get your take on how things are going, mm-hmm. what could be better, what's already going well. So that's the first thing right there.
So this is like day one, week one, would you suggest meeting with everybody as a group and then begin to start having one-on-ones to really, get to know everybody's ideas and thoughts?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Don't roll in on day one and start isolating people into one-on-one conversations. That's going to create a buzz and some fear and what's mm-hmm. going on, and get everyone together in the same room, have some donuts, whatever, mm-hmm. and talk about this change, right? Again, I'm excited. I know it's a little bit awkward. I want to meet with each of you over the next couple weeks and ask you some questions. And I'm going to ask you these questions. Give people the questions up front. What's going well? What would you like to see different? Mm-hmm. What would you like me to do? Mm-hmm. Not do? Whatever.
Right. Now, tell me what you think about this. I think in this first, this transition period, the first couple weeks, it might also be important to, establish some sort of authority in a way, right? Meaning you want to give off the vibe that, you're going to be a good leader and that, you have ideas for the team as well, right? So would you say it's also important to, without having any, I would imagine in the first, month or so, you don't want to do any huge overhauls or anything to make it seem like you're coming in and just change things drastically, but, let them know that you have, share your vision and get their opinion on your vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're talking about a really fine line, and so let's talk about this. I think you're absolutely right on one point there for sure. Is don't come in and make changes right away. Do not come in and announce your 12-point plan for how things are going to be different. You're going to create fear and resentment at that point. Absolutely come in a curious mode with focused on inquiry and asking their thought. I think that right there, it accomplishes a couple things. It tease people up for the fact that you are going to be having a vision and possibly some change. Right there, you literally in a pretty kind way, you are establishing authority by even saying, I'm going to be asking you questions and getting your opinions before I make any moves or changes or, whatever. I'm here to find out what you guys think. That not only shows a respect for your new employees, it also actually demonstrates authority because it kind of tees people up that you're going to possibly be making some change. I think that's the best way to approach it. Coming in with any kind of I'm now the boss and I have to establish authority in any kind of direct way is a bit of an overkill at this point. Sure. Right. You just want to be confident, right? Mm-hmm. Have a meeting, show some confidence. That act alone says to people, hey, this person is owning their role. They're embodying it. They don't look afraid. I think the authority speaks for itself. Sure. In that moment. Now, let's go further, right? It's now, the second week, it's the third week, and there are some things that need to get cleaned up. Let's just say, hypothetically, things that haven't been going well for a while. You've had an eye on it. Mm-hmm. That could be an individual behavior. That could be maybe a practice that we're engaging in as a group. I do think it's worth addressing that. I think it's healthy to address that probably within the first couple weeks. Okay. So there's an opportunity to demonstrate your authority, and not for the sake of demonstrating it, but, step up and say, look, hey, here's something that I've been aware of for the last couple of years. I'm not real happy with it. Have some dialogue, maybe ask some questions, right? But go ahead and set an expectation. Right. Go ahead and say, hey, I know this is a change, and it's okay to say it this way. I know this is a change. I acknowledge that. And I know change is hard for all of us. I would like us to be doing less of this and more of this. Right.
And I think that as long as you give off the impression when you're making some of these changes that this is what's going to be best for the group, right? Even if not everybody agrees, but they at least believe that you have the group's best interest in mind. Okay, that's a lot different than just saying, I have this whole new vision and here's what we're doing.
Yeah, what that gets to is, why? Why are we making this change, right? This is because it will benefit our customers, it'll benefit us, it'll benefit the company. And again, I'm open to feedback. That I'm gonna be threading that through this entire podcast, right? Mm-hmm. As you're making this change from peer to boss, I am open to feedback. I do want to hear what you guys have to say for sure. Right. But I need to make some decisions. That's my role. And so, here's an expectation that we haven't had in the past. I'm going to introduce this new expectation. Let's talk about it. But no, it is an expectation. And this does represent a change. And there's good reason for it. And so right there, again, you're on the power differential scale, you're using your authority at that point because you are now introducing a new expectation, and you're going to literally hold people accountable to that. Again, if you go into this new relationship with some humility, asking for feedback, even mentioning the awkwardness, there's room for you to actually make some probably minor changes, maybe, or some, new expectations up front.
Right. Yeah. And folks, I would say if you haven't already, go back and listen to the power differential episode, I believe episode 2 or 3. Anyways, now I would like to think that, and we're going to have a whole episode on running one-on-one meetings, down the road. But in my mind, like this is the most important thing you can do is start meeting with every employee one-on-one, get to know them, and spend considerable time here from the start, asking questions like, take me through your objectives and where things are at with you right now. Are there any specific areas that you need my support as a manager, right? Tell me about your development planning and any career conversations you were having before I came on, right? These one-on-one conversations of just getting to know people and creating the relationship there that lets them understand you are in their corner and you're here to go to bat for them.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if I had to list the things to do in your first, month, we've talked about having this group meeting and calling out the elephant in the living room and asking for suggestions and feedback and setting some expectations. This one you just mentioned, Ethan, is
bringing the beer keg.
No,
just on Fridays, so folks.
Okay, Ethan, you're going sideways here, dude.
Crazy.
You're going sideways. We're not bringing in a beer keg, right?
We're not.
No. Well, let's get back to some of the fun stuff we can do as a new manager,
right,
of peers. But let's not
planning the party planning committee.
Yeah. You know what? Can you just stay on topic here?
Sorry.
All right. So what you just brought in was this one-on-one piece. That's absolutely vital. And you're right. We are going to address this as a whole separate podcast because there are some really important tricks of the trade here, like how to have these one-on-ones, how often, what kinds of questions to ask, and even how to ask those questions. We will get to that.
By the way, you should be having one-on-ones regardless of where you're at as a manager.
Yeah, this is not just a new manager habit. This is something we should be doing anyway. So coming in though as a new manager of peers, if there haven't been one-on-ones before between all of you and your boss, it's time to start. Mm-hmm. And if you have been having them, then great, just continue them. But this is super important that you establish this relationship right away. Now, when you say build relationship, what you're doing here is you're actually building a new relationship. You already have relationship with these people of some kind or another.
Correct.
You're now establishing this different relationship, which is a really good way to balance the power differential. You're meeting with your new employees, let's say once a month, and you're meeting with them more often for, things that come up during the week and troubleshooting for sure. But you're having this sort of particular kind of summit meeting once a month where you're checking in on things exactly like you just said. How are you doing? How can I help? What are your career goals? What are the roadblocks that you're facing? Help me understand your world and what you're up against here and what your job is. There's lots of cool things you can do here. But the beauty of these one-on-ones up front as a new manager of previous peers is you are doing so many things at once right there. You are establishing some authority. You are building relationship. You're building trust. You're learning. You're supporting. The list goes on.
Now, would you say that as a new manager, you should spend more time in those one-on-one meetings, like do them more frequently from the beginning, just to kind of, lay the groundwork for a good, healthy, manager-employee relationship?
It's not a requirement, but it's also not a bad idea. Because up front, you might want to front load things like, a little more heavy on the, I want your suggestions and your take on this department or on this company or on your job. So yeah, you might want to have more of an interview kind of process going on so you can really get to know where they're at and what they think. Learning their job if you don't already know it. Now you might already know it, but if you don't, that would be another. So yeah, I guess I would say, yeah, I think there's some room for some extra time to build relationship, to gain knowledge, to build trust.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious if, in these one-on-one meetings, given that the goal of them, at least as a new manager, is to figure out how you can best lead them so they can be successful, which ultimately, leads the organization to be successful. Is it appropriate to ask questions about the old manager that was in that place before you? Let's say hypothetically that obviously that person didn't get like a demotion. They're no longer in your group or even with the company. Can you ask questions such as, hey, can you tell me a little bit about, what really wasn't working for you with the previous manager that you would like to see different with me? Or what was something about their leadership style that you didn't appreciate? Something of that nature. I feel like there's a line there that you got to be careful, but it's valuable information to know, I would imagine.
Yeah. I'm gonna advise that we there's another way to get to what I think we'd be wanting to get to there. I want to advise us to really to stay pretty far away from that line. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, I think, here in just a few minutes. But one of the worst things we can do as a manager, especially a new manager, and I will even say especially as a new manager of people that were your peers in the past, is even start to go down the road of anything that feels like bad mouthing any other leader, whether they were a previous leader or a current leader. And we'll talk in a few minutes about why that is so important. But I think this can be a really dangerous path to go down because, again, even worded carefully, it can really easily kind of degenerate into a kind of a bitch session about this other person. Oh, I hated it when he did this. And you and I both know it can go there really easy. And that's for lots of reasons, it's a very negative place to go. I think one thing we can do to replace that is, what do you want and need from me as your leader?
Okay.
Right.
So let's look at the other side of the coin of that. Not what they did wrong, not what that they did wrong, but more what can you do?
What can I do right? Right. And what do you need from me, and what do you not need from me? Right. You can cover both sides of the coin without even bringing in the other person. Mm-hmm. Right. What do you need from me as a boss? What do you want from me as a boss? What would you like me not to be doing as your boss? Give me some ideas about kind of what you need or what you want. That's just a really good question anyways. And you don't actually have to conjure up any past ghosts at that point. You can just go forward.
Let bygones be bygones.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, when they start bringing up, John was just a jerk, and you and I both know, blah 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 blah. It's okay to say, just nod toward that a little bit. Yeah, that was uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you want me to do or not do. Right? Just kind of steer away. You can acknowledge the comment, you can acknowledge the frustration without moving into a discussion about that.
And for folks out there that have aspirations to move up into a management position, keep in mind that you don't want to be in the awkward situation where you've been bad-mouthing your current manager, and then all of a sudden you are now the manager, and all the employees around you know how you felt about that previous manager.
Amen, man. I that's a whole nother topic, right? What do we do to prepare ourselves to possibly become a leader? And I would absolutely think in terms of a lot of areas around integrity, gossip, negativity, lots of stuff that we should probably talk about at some other date.
Definitely. Now, this is probably as good as of a time as any. That was a lot of as's in that.
a lot of as's and ofs.
A lot of as's and ofs. What I'm trying to say here is, how do you handle resentment, right? I've seen situations, I've been in organizations where, and I think we talked about this earlier, someone now has to manage another person who, say, also applied to that management position, right? And now they didn't get it, and now you're their manager, and there's obvious resentment, however that manifests itself. How do you handle that in general, right? Where you go from peer and now the boss. They didn't sign up for this. They didn't sign up for you to be their boss. What steps do you take there?
I am just a big fan of authenticity in the workplace, and I think we're going to be talking about. I think we've already talked about authenticity here in other podcasts. We'll continue to talk about it. I think this is an example of where authenticity really becomes one of your best friends. I think to just sit down with somebody and, as you said earlier, kind of talk about the elephant in the living room. Hey, you know what? You and I both applied for this role. Mm-hmm. I got the role. You didn't get the role. Let's talk about that. How you doing? How you feeling about that?
I should have got it.
So you're upset. You're angry about this. So tell me more about that.
Well, I just was more qualified for the role. I've been here longer, and I just feel like I deserved it.
Yeah, but you're a complete jerk.
Okay.
No, just kidding. We're not going there. No, you're absolutely right on track, right? I mean, so I'm mad. I didn't, I feel like like you weren't as deserving as I was. I can totally understand why you see it that way. That makes me feel bad. This could be a challenge for us. I would get there pretty quickly to this piece. This could be a challenge for us. What can we do? What can I do? How can we make this work? Right. Now, if that person does not have an answer and they just want to be upset, it's actually okay, because I'm assuming this conversation is happening within the first, maybe week or so. Mm-hmm. It's okay to stop the conversation and say, look, let's just spend some time maybe separately thinking about this. Let's circle back. Next week, let's get together. But here's the bottom line. And this should be said, something like this. I really want to have a healthy, positive working relationship with you. That really, really matters to me. And I think that statement, which is very warm and sets up your, desire for peace and health, is really good for that other person to hear that. And if they don't respond great in that moment, or they don't respond at all or whatever, that's fine. But you've planted the seed that I really want to have a healthy relationship with you. So can we both think about this? What can we do to be able to kind of move forward and let go or move past whatever might be bothering you or me about this whole thing?
Right. That makes sense. Now, I mean, in general, we should talk about how to handle, challenges to authority, right? I like to use the analogy of it's kind of like having, when the substitute teacher comes in, it's like, all right, all the students are going to see how far they can push, what they can get away with, right? And so they're gonna play around, right? They're gonna do that dance for a while. So there could be different challenges to your new authority, such as a decision being made without your knowledge, that should be in your court, or an issue that you close gets reopened without your knowledge. I mean, first off, are there ways to kind of address that before they even happen? I guess we'll just start with that. Are there ways to do that before it even happens?
Absolutely. I'm glad you're bringing this up. I think the proactive piece of this, and I don't want to repeat everything, but it does include those initial group meetings. It includes these one-on-ones. Think of it this way: the more you build, the more trust and respect you build, the less likely you're going to have a whole bunch of unhealthy pushback. Right now, you may get some anyways, and that's normal because people resist change, and there's a lot of we push against. We want to go back to what it was like before, so we push against change. But I tell you what, you build trust and respect. You build team. For example, you ask your group, "Hey, let's talk about our